I don't even remember. I remember that when I was a child I used to draw everything. The first, what they told me to do in class, and then on my own. I would draw everything what it was at the time. What it could attract a child, the Smurfs. You know, comic book characters, the ones I liked. I copied them, and then things of mine on my own that I don't even remember anymore. If you want, we go to Teruel and we open the trunks. No, it has nothing to do with it. By the fact that there were Apertigas there, I will focus on that one in that world. Mine was almost, I wouldn't say accidental, what it's like to get into what it's like the world of fashion. Because fashion did start me off to like or interest or attract, when I had conscience or more conscience of my body, which I guess what it is in adolescence, and so when you start to have or start to notice what to wear, what not to wear. And then, apart from that, coupled with how much I like drawing, because I started making sketches and all of a sudden I realized that I liked the world of fashion. I started as a designer's assistant, that is, the design team, and there came a point where for some orders from Victorio and Lequino in Seville I discovered, not inside, at that moment when they commissioned that. I found out, it was when I was doing my assistant work in the design team, I drew and enjoyed it. But I realized that the more enjoyed was when the work was done. As a designer, you have to make a flat drawing so that the pattern maker understands how it is the garment and where a cut has to go, a clothespin, or what is the shape of the contour, and that was the technical part, let's say, of what the design of a garment was. But when I enjoyed it was when it was done, the drawing of the garment already in perspective and in pretty, with a girl inside moving the garment, that it is for when it is made for catalogs, for example, and that's when I realized that I enjoyed it. So, between that and the orders I received by Victorio and Lequino, with which was born a friendship, and I began to frequent their studio, I discovered that my job, which vocation was not that of a designer, but to draw the designs of others. It was more or less when Victorio and Lequino commissioned me, when they launched in '92 with the Seville Expo, launched a collection at the same time. For the catwalk I mean, that was called Carmen, and at the same time, the same perfume with the same name as Carmen. Matching it with the Expo '92 in Seville, then they required me, my work, to make 2 press kits. One for the perfume and one for the presentation of the collection. That folder went to all the press, and among them, Cosmopolitan. When they saw these folders they contacted me at summer of '92, which was when it was launched. All this, and they proposed me to do the fashion pages in your magazine, that is, the cover that was left at the beginning, to everything that was reporting fashionable regulars every month. Well, I used to make it. And I was doing it from '92 to 2008. That the crisis came, and in that first crisis we had unrestricted services and suppliers to the maximum. And there I ended up with what I was basically with Cosmopolitan. But well, then I continued with others. Mujer Hoy, Yo Doña. Outside Spain, one that disappeared, her name was Angelines in France. And then editions. What happens is that this type of editions were already talking about my work of some way, that is, they were editions that came to me, not to commission my work, but to talk about it. When 2008 came, as I was saying, far from me going wrong, it was quite the opposite, because firms like Audemars Piguet appeared. Is a watchmaking firm, and I've made Viñas del Vero, Citroën. Well, the Citroën thing I think was earlier. But well, I want to say that from 2008 onwards there were signatures with which I made works for Image, where the work is very much in the hands of the better paid than at work editorial. In the last period, in high school, in one of these art classes, they made me touch all the techniques from gouache, tempera, oil, pastels, everything, and one of them was the markers. So, when Victorio and Liquino came about, I was telling you about Carmen, there was already on the market a range of marker pens that are not used by them. Limited only to what we knew in a way, like more of a level, of I don't know, of a how should I put it, layman's or street, when it comes to saying I need a marker to do a job. Always thought of the typical required in the school. And as they had come up so much, variety of this product, I decided to buy all of them markers of a specific brand to make the work go faster. And you can also get the same type of textures. Then aside, as I was working on those papers, I was discovering that I needed in some points, because although with the technique of the marker pen it is known that in order to achieve, for example, a light area, you have to go booking that area and go doing fades and such. But to enhance that area of light I needed a tool that I didn't need to the transparent felt tip pens. Then I turned to another line of markers that was born in those years. I talked about the early 90s, as I said before, that are opaque. That is, the ink is opaque, is not like that of a conventional felt tip pen, which is transparent ink. Then I decided to experiment at some points, but you know, as without fear I said I'm going to stick a target in here and see how I kept it and blurred it with my finger. Then, little by little, I was able to perfecting at my own risk to pick up a marker of the ones I used to use in color. I would take a little bit of white ink and then he controlled the target he wanted to hit as light in the finish, in the shines or wherever you need it. But it was already more defined, more refined, cleaner. So, it looks like very simple, explained like this. But I couldn't at first. The textures that are achieved when over the years you've accumulated a lot of experience and you're accumulating mistakes and you realize where you have to stop, where you don't. If you go overboard with the white, that to recover it at best you have to stain it more. So all that is, as I say, difficulties that will give them to you practice. So it is the accumulation of everything, of the use of all these tools was what somehow made me come across a technique that is not in any method, in any book or anything, and that somehow way came out of me out of my own need. As I say, I didn't read it anywhere, nor did I read it. No one told me as you've tried to mix this ink with this, that this ink can be smudged and this one cannot. So that's why I'm attributed that technical, and in fact there are centers or universities who hire me as a professional to talk about this technique or to show them in practice and in reality how I use it. Because it's something that's not on the books of other types of tools. That was also unplanned. Bearing in mind that we are in the countryside of what fashion illustration is formerly known as fashion costume design. Characters have always been used, they're stylized, elongated and so on. Then I, by way of amusement, not with the intention that by making or define that kind of character for me means that's an ideal woman. But I started doing it, as I say, as a diversion, styling them exaggeratedly, but at the same time making sure that the movements, the perspective and anatomy in the movements, as I say, garments and everything, the texture of the fabrics as real as possible for to make them look like real characters. This is a bit like what happens, or I guess it will happen to me, as with haute couture. Everyone knows it's not the same to buy a pret-a-porter than a dress of haute couture. A haute couture dress wears handcrafted finishes and all this, and somehow sets you apart when you wear it from someone else, that is, of what is chain production. So, without detracting from those who work with these kinds of techniques, that is, with those techniques or with little more mechanical or computer, I have the possibility, and I actually use Photoshop for editing touch-ups. That's what it's good for. in that I adapt to new technologies. I use Photoshop in steps that before I had to do them on paper by hand. For example, if I am wrong in the proportion of a hand with respect to the rest of the figure, and if I have it, I scan it and I have it on screen, and I don't have to be like before, I had to hold and touch up my hand, make it smaller, all that manually, and that gives me time. But what is the original, since that's what the world is going to see or what the customer will see, already the original finished in color, that goes entirely by hand. I insist, but then I do serve myself, of this technology for small touch-up where you have left off a speck or something, but nothing more. I came to Saragossa, as I say, in '98, shortly before the emergence of the issue of digitization, and the fact of being able to digitize an image and let it travel through of the internet offered me the power to live in Saragossa or wherever I would like. I could live anywhere I wanted. Coming from Saragossa was a personal question, but especially was because it marked me. In other words, Saragossa is located strategically between Barcelona and Madrid, that of having to need to be in either of the two sites that are, let's say, the two great nuclei at a professional level, for this type of work, in my case. But regardless of that, as I say, anecdotally, and also, most of my work until 2008, I did a lot of editorial work here at Spain, in fashion editorials, and as I said at the beginning. But from then on, I think that most of my work, the most important jobs, or I don't know how to say it, that is to say, of more weight, are even outside Spain. I mean, I could have to live wherever he wants, and from here he left. From this location, from Saragossa, has all work left for the United States, and it has not been necessary. Not even with the previous meetings to talk about work was needed to move from here.